Hey, sorry guys. Hopefully you come on back. Hey, welcome back, everyone. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties in there. So if you had a question, I'm going to see if I can find those questions. So just give me a second and I'll see what I can find. Okay, if you had a question, just go ahead and put it in the comment box from one of the earlier ones. I do apologize. I'm going to see. Doesn't look like I can get the old questions. Okay. Hello again. Sorry. I think the last question I saw was, what am I reading? So what am I reading? What have you got for us? What was your last question? That was the last question that I saw. I am so sorry. I hit a button and this is my first time trying this format, so I apologize. But I think I was finishing up by saying that that it actually was helpful for me in learning, that there could be more, there could be different types of sin, categorizations of sins rather than just mortal and venial. And I found that really helpful to my spiritual life and to going to confession. So go ahead, if you have any follow-up questions, go ahead and put them in the chat or in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer those. Yeah, welcome back, everyone. Sorry, newbie here. Not actually new to live streaming. I used to teach almost exclusively through live streaming software, and yet I'm somehow out of practice, so I apologize. So what I will say, I had the first video of this series, which was 5 frustrations, right? Which was the converting from traditionalist Catholic to Orthodox. That first video, a lot of my viewers actually came from Reddit. I found that my video had been uploaded there, and that people were commenting on it and discussing it. I didn't even know that it had been posted on Reddit. So there you go. That's how a video goes from my videos going from 100 or 200 views. Copy or paste from the old chat. That is an excellent idea. Oh, someone is doing that. Okay. Let's see. We have Ms. Jules joining the chat. What is the most niche frustration that I have? The most niche frustration that I have coming to Eastern Orthodoxy from traditionalist Catholicism. I think it's probably, I think the biggest thing is not using a book for translating the service. I mean, there's certainly, if you go to a divine liturgy in another language, they'll often have translations there for you. But in traditionalist Catholicism, you always bring your missal with you to divine liturgy. And when you bring your missal with you to divine liturgy, get very used to having, sort of a leather bound book in your hand and reading the translation on one side and the Latin on the other side. But I found it really hard to get used to just showing up to Divine Liturgy without a book. And I still usually bring my prayer rope to sort of have something in my hand while I'm at Divine Liturgy. So that's maybe a pretty niche frustration that I have. But there's probably some others. Language, those sorts of things. So that's probably... I think how fast the chant is sometimes a little bit frustrating. And if you're a musician and you're used to one type of music and you go to a completely different type of music, that can be sort of off-putting. So there's another niche frustration. Let's see what we got. Oh, one of my readings said I'm the one who posted your video to Reddit. No, thank you. That was awesome. Thank you. That was really cool. So I loved seeing the interaction there. Feel free to continue. Okay, let's see here. In your opinion, when did Catholic saints begin to be really heterodox? It seems to me that the likes of Anselm and Aquinas aren't that different from orthodoxy if properly understood. And then one of my readings said, to go off Canadis' question, how do Catholicism and Orthodoxy differ on their understanding of merits? It's a concept that feels really foreign to me. Okay, when did Catholic saints begin to be really heterodox? I think, and this is kind of a, how to put it, this is maybe a little bit of a controversial opinion, but the reality is that there were saints that disagreed with mainstream orthodoxy in their theological opinions from the very beginning of the Orthodox Church. And that is just me speaking as a classicist who used to teach Latin and Greek, right? Generally speaking, there have always been people who have been sort of outside the norm of theological opinions. And it's not surprising that when the two churches split from one another, different subsets of church fathers got different levels of emphasis. So, for example, in the East, you have less of St. Augustine, right? You also don't have St. John Cassian, but he becomes pretty important in the East, So I think it's more of a subset of the ancient saints. Now, when do we start having some very different, theological opinions? I would say even as early as the 1200s, you start seeing Latin fathers that are picking up on different emphases. But I think generally speaking, they're different emphases and not that their opinions aren't always all that different if you're reading them charitably and if you're reading them thoroughly. And like I said, my background is more in Western Catholic theology. So I'm not sort of trying to represent Eastern theology here. I'm just saying that, as a person who studied Western theology, you see a lot more themes that are, in fact, in the Eastern Fathers, in Eastern Orthodox theology, in Western writers, read from a certain perspective. So I don't know. But, I certainly think by the 13th or 14th century, you have a pretty big split. Certainly by the scholastic period, you see some big differences. But Thomas Aquinas was well regarded in much of the Orthodox world at the time, especially, you have Bulgaria, you have Kiev, Thomas Aquinas was read widely in the Eastern Orthodox seminaries. So it's not the case that that the East was just completely unaware of Western theological developments. That's just not true. Okay, let's see what else do we have. So the next one, how do Catholicism and Orthodoxy differ on their understanding of merits? Catholicism has an understanding of merit whereby the merits that whereby whenever you do something good, for example, whenever you do a good work, it both has an effect, immediately, but it also has an effect with God in terms of whenever you do that good work, it sort of it sort of helps you to advance your relationship with God in a very concrete way. And this is almost like a token, right? You've done something good, and so you're getting a token back, or you're getting something back for it. And that's the idea of merit in the West. This plays out in sort of all sorts of Catholic devotions. For example, you may pray the rosary, and you may pray it for a particular intention, but then you offer the merits of that act, the merits of the rosary, for a different intention, meaning the benefits of the good work that you performed, you're offering for a specific purpose. And I think, generally speaking, my experience with Eastern Orthodoxy is that they don't sort of quantify merit or grace in this way. And of course, that's partly because grace is uncreated, right, in the Orthodox Church. So it's not something that, is made by God and has this quantifiable and concrete reality in the same way. So Orthodox merit maybe is a little bit more nebulous and a little less materialistic, I think, than Catholicism. But again, I'm just speaking that from a former Catholic perspective. Okay, let's see. How do you handle the straw man attacks and Western anger from the Protestant fundamentalist phronema? For those of you who don't know, a phronema is a state of mind or a mindset or a perspective of one's heart, of one's nous. So how do you handle the straw man attacks and Western anger from the Protestant and fundamentalist phronema within pockets of Eastern Orthodoxy, such as Father Josiah Trenum, Father Stephen Damick, etc.? Okay, so I think that this question is asking, or is accepting as a fact, that Father Josiah Trenum, Father Stephen Damick, etc., have a Protestant fundamentalist phronema, and I'm not sure that I would entirely agree with that statement. I think that in many cases you're getting, with apologists, with people that are writing books that are geared towards a specific audience, they take certain assumptions for granted. And they take sort of the deeper things in the theology for granted, and maybe you're just getting the sort of surface level analysis of their thought. So I wouldn't deny to Father Josiah Trenum or Father Stephen Damick, I wouldn't deny to them, an Orthodox phronema. I don't think it's something that I can judge, especially judge a priest on and his perspective. I do think that when we have straw man attacks on Catholicism, that's not a good thing. And we need to make sure that we're fully educated on what it is that Catholicism actually teaches, what it is that Protestantism actually teaches, and make sure that we're fully educated on those subjects before we start attacking them. I think, unless it's maybe just illustrative of our views, and that's a very charitable way of reading it. Whenever they say we're not like Catholics who believe this, and maybe that statement of what Catholics believe is untrue, maybe we can view that as just a way of explaining what we believe, rather than necessarily trying to represent what they believe. So that's just my take on that. We need to read and listen, especially to priests, in the most charitable way possible. And when they get something wrong, just understand they're trying to represent our beliefs, not trying to represent necessarily the other side's beliefs. So just, read things charitably and move along. But that being said, Father Josiah Trenum was a big part of my conversion, and Father Stephen Damick as well. So I have no problem saying that many of their materials are, fundamental to people coming to a knowledge of the Orthodox faith. let's see. Father John Chrysovagus, I believe it's Chrysovagus or Chrysovagus, said that the West has a tendency to emphasize that we are in the world, forgetting that we are not of the world, and the East has the reverse problem. Thoughts, and what can we learn? He may be right. He may be right. I can definitely believe that the West has a tendency to emphasize sort of maybe worldly worldly categories for things, right? Offering the merits of something for a specific prayer rather than just praying for something. So maybe the West uses more worldly categories than the East does, but I'm not so sure that the East. Maybe sometimes the East does make things a little more mysterious than they have to be. And I do think that is true, that sometimes the East will say, it's a mystery. And then they'll go on and explain it in 100 pages what the mystery is. But I've seen that not be true. I've definitely seen things over-explained. So, okay, let's see here. Has your conversion affected the way you see Pope Francis? Has my conversion affected the way I see Pope Francis? Well, I no longer think of him as that much of a problem, right? Because I follow, I'm under a patriarch who is a successor of St. Peter in the Patriarchate of Antioch, and of course all of the Orthodox Church is in communion with the Patriarch of Antioch. So, I listen to the Patriarch of Antioch on these things, not in the same way as I once tried to follow the Pope, but I don't really worry about what the Pope says in terms of it affecting my faith anymore. And I think that was a big thing. Part of my story, and I'm going to digress just a little bit here. Part of my story is that I had started looking into Eastern Orthodoxy for some time, especially Russian Orthodoxy and the history of the Russian Orthodox Church at the turn of the 20th century and the end of the 19th century. So this historical era had become an obsession of mine. And so I had started reading all about, the characters and reading biographies and that sort of thing. And I found that I just couldn't look away from Orthodoxy anymore, that it was a real argument against Catholicism. And as I did that, I found that I could no longer justify the traditionalist Catholic position. I came to the conclusion that tradition should definitely trump the Pope, that we should maintain tradition rather than follow the Pope. So I had come to that conclusion and then found myself without a church, right? So at first I was thinking, I can no longer be Catholic, but what can I be? Oh, wait, I think I'll go for Orthodoxy. That is the religion, the Christian faith that truly follows tradition, or at least places tradition in its proper place, as the sort of in its primacy of divine revelation. So I became interested in the Orthodox Church, and I decided one Sunday to risk it. And those of you who are Catholics and watching this stream know that it is a risky move, because you believe that missing Mass on a Sunday or holy day of obligation is a mortal sin if you do it deliberately. And I very deliberately missed Mass and went to an Orthodox church for divine liturgy, and found that indeed this was the direction that God was calling me to. And shortly thereafter, Traditionis Custodes came out, which banned the traditional Latin Mass. So I didn't go to the Orthodox Church because Pope Francis was banning the traditional Latin Mass. But it happened shortly after I had decided to start visiting the Orthodox Church. And I took that as a sign that, okay, I found the exit door and the exit door was slammed behind me. So I know which direction I'm going now. And, for a while, though, even as I was starting to visit the Orthodox Church, I was very angry at Pope Francis and very angry at the Catholic Church. And I ended up putting sort of my spiritual journey towards Orthodoxy on hold until I could deal with that anger, until I could come to recognize that I was converting to Orthodoxy, not because I thought I was right or I thought I had found all the right answers, but because I was truly repenting of my sins and following after Jesus Christ in his church, right? So I had to get past the anger at my old church and turn to Orthodoxy. Okay, so let's see what else we have here. Let's see. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I've definitely forgiven Pope Francis in my heart for having taken the beautiful traditional Latin Mass from so many people. I'm no longer angry about that, and he doesn't really affect my faith that much at all. But maybe I would warn some other Eastern Orthodox people, be careful with dealing with him. We don't need that kind of thinking in our church, perhaps. But I leave that to the bishops. Let's see. Why do you think that in general Catholicism eschews Hezek Kasm? I think that Catholicism views Hezek Kasm as a form of quietism, which was a condemned heresy in the Western Church. The idea of quieting your mind and letting the presence of God just sort of do its thing. I think also Catholicism is highly suspicious of anything that might be sort of hypnotic. And there can be certain practices in Hezek Kasm that are, based on the use of the breath and on physical postures and so forth that probably strike a lot of Catholics as being very similar to yoga or to other sort of Far Eastern meditation practices. So that's probably why most Catholics have a problem with it. But I do think that Eastern Orthodoxy has a lot to say about how incarnate our faith is, that we use our bodies and we do experience consolations. That's certainly to be found in The Way of a Pilgrim. So if you read The Way of a Pilgrim, there's kind of a pretty good explanation of all of that in response to a Catholic. Let's see. Did you notice any difference between the idea of the beatific vision and of theosis? Beatific vision in Catholicism is when the body has been removed, right? And when the body has been removed from the soul, and the soul has been purified of its venial sins and is free of mortal sins, then it perceives God in his uncreated nature, not just in his divine energies, but in his essence. And because God is what is truly good, beautiful, true, merciful, loving, etc., that the soul experiences perfect happiness, beatitudes from beati, meaning blessed or happy. So that is what the beatific vision is. Theosis is the process of transforming now in this life to being more like God by participating in his divine energies and his grace. And that starts now. Whereas the beatific vision is only after you die or if there is or the general resurrection when you are purified of all of your sins. So theosis is a process that starts when you're sinful. I mean, it has to start when you're sinful, right? So there's a big difference between theosis and the beatific vision. Let's see here. Was the straw that broke the camel's back, to say that officially made you leave Catholicism? The straw that broke the camel's back was attending divine liturgy and seeing the beauty of worship in the divine liturgy. Yeah, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I would also say Callistos Ware's explanation of the filioque debate and his sort of history of the Orthodox Church, that was a big contributing factor as well. And would you prefer to attend liturgy in the States or back in home countries? Jules probably knows the answer to this. I would love to. I would love to attend divine liturgy, over in Orthodox countries. I think there's a sort of very organic tradition that happens over there. I've been blessed to go into some churches overseas, and I just see, a living faith that's not something that has to be looked up in a book like we have so often in America. So, and it helps that, if you go to divine liturgy in Greece, that there's a beach nearby. So, that doesn't hurt either. Let's see, what else do we have? Are there things we can do to help the Catholic Church recover the orthodoxy it has lost? Also, what are things we ourselves can learn from Catholics today? So, I would say, in terms of helping the Catholic Church recover orthodoxy, the main thing is to be very clear on what the Orthodox Church is about to Catholics. I think there is a view among Catholics that the Orthodox Church is pretty close to Catholicism on most issues. For example, the sacraments, or having bishops, or apostolic succession. But until they learn to respect their own liturgical and theological traditions, how can we expect them to really understand or respect ours, other than sort of as a foreign curiosity? So in terms of talking with Catholics, one thing I like to do is say, well, here's the divine liturgy, and that's similar to this from the Latin liturgy, the one that y'all got rid of in the 60s. That's kind of a dunk on Catholics, to be fair. But, I think the biggest thing is helping them recover their own liturgical and theological traditions, and realize that, for 1,000 years we were in communion, and that was based on some common understandings that maybe are being lost in the Catholic Church. Also, what are things that we ourselves can learn from Catholics today? I think the biggest thing is their unity, especially in the New World. It's not true that the Catholic Church in America is completely united. There are different jurisdictions of Catholicism in the United States, but they are all sort of pulling together. And I think that Orthodox, we probably need that too. We need a little bit more unity across jurisdictions. We need to have some standard practices. We need to have something similar to the safety protocols that the Catholics have adopted to protect minors from abuse. I mean, that's just, one of the most basic things, is creating some accountability, especially for adults that are working with youth. I see all of the time in Orthodox churches that there's no protections there, and they just assume it'll all work out. But I think we do need those protections as well in the Orthodox Church. I think, we need to pull together more as a church in this country, and be less at loggerheads with each other. So that's something that we could maybe take from Catholics. And let's see, what else do we have? Thank you for your reply. I didn't mean to slander anyone. They've been helpful to me as well, except when they speak on Roman Catholicism. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, you got to take, as I said in one of my other videos, Catholic converts kind of have a difficult position, right? Because a lot of the materials out there are geared towards Protestants rather than Catholics. So, a lot of times what you read from, prominent apologists are going to be trying to address Catholic apologists or Protestants. They're not actually going to be engaging in sort of the deeper theological debates that are out there between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. So, we do have this trick of like, let's see, what's better, a trad wife or an ortho wife? Says Jules. Definitely an Orthodox wife, of course. In case you all haven't figured out, my wife is in the chat box asking questions because she's a big fan. So say hi to everyone. Okay. Anyway. Okay, other questions. Other questions. Anyone else? Did you feel like when you converted, you also needed to ethnically convert? As an inquirer in a Greek Eastern Orthodox church, I struggle with this. This is fun. This is a fun question. Thank you for asking this. Okay. In America, right? Let's just be honest with ourselves and acknowledge that the number of things that are ethnically distinctive about America are pretty slim. Okay? I'm not saying our political system, I'm not saying our habits, or maybe, but we're more regional than national in terms of our ethnic identity, if we have one as Americans. So whenever I hear people say, I'm an American, I'm not Greek, I sort of ask, well, you can definitely be both, because it's not like being American. It's not like being American takes that much, right, to be to identify as American. There are plenty of Greek Americans that identify as both, for example. So let's just be honest that Americans are in sort of a beneficial position as far as adapting to the culture of their new church. The second thing is this: do you need to become ethnic or to ethnically convert? And the answer is no. You don't have to try to pretend that you're Greek or pretend that you're Russian in order to convert. But if you are going to get a lot out of your church, your new church, and I then you need to understand and empathize with the ethnicity of the people that you're going to church with. And you have to realize that the vast majority of Orthodox people are not Americans, right? They don't speak the same language as you. They don't have the same cultural assumptions that you have, and you need to become empathetic and educated on those viewpoints so that you can understand what they're trying to tell you, so that whenever you read one of the Greek Orthodox modern saints, that you understand what context he's speaking from. You can't just pretend that the ethnicity doesn't exist. The other thing I would say is that just because you stick strictly to Greek, just because you stick strictly to Greek chant does not mean that you are becoming Greek, right? It does not mean that you are ethnically converting. Greek chant is for everybody. It was the chant of the Eastern Roman Empire. So it covered many different nationalities and still does cross many nationalities. So, and of course, the New Testament is in Greek. So, all Orthodox are a little bit Greek, I would say. I'll say controversially. So all Orthodox are a little bit Greek. All Christians are a little bit Greek, insofar as our New Testament and all of our early church writings are in Greek. But then all Orthodoxy is a little bit Russian too, because some of our most beloved modern saints are Russian. So we need to understand a little bit about Russia to understand Orthodoxy from their perspective. So no, you don't have to ethnically convert, but the more you learn about sort of ethnic Orthodoxy, or the ethnicities that make up the majority of Orthodoxy, I think the better off you'll be. Let's see. Welcome, Rumpelstiltskin. Welcome. We've had some great conversations in the comment section. So thank you and welcome. I'm glad you got to make it. What am I reading asks, I noticed that Catholic prayer, fasting, liturgy is now much easier than it is for the Orthodox. Yeah. Is there a temptation to feel like one is joining a spiritual elite when converting from Roman Catholicism to Eastern Orthodoxy? There may be a temptation. I can definitely understand that temptation. But here's the thing. Before you fast, and you try to follow all of the strict rules of Orthodox fasting, before you adopt a prayer rule, make sure you consult an Orthodox priest, and make sure you're not just doing it for the sake of pride, to feel like you're elite. So I will say I've known quite a few Catholics that fast a lot. I've known quite a few Catholics who have long prayer rules in the morning and evening. So, don't feel like you have to do everything. Talk to your priest, see what you can do reasonably. You're not trying to join the special forces of Orthodoxy, right? Unless you become a monk, and then you are joining the special forces of Orthodoxy. So there's especially such a temptation whenever you don't consult with a priest. I had wanted to say that by converting, that doesn't mean that the Catholic saints are no longer saints. Just means that Orthodox Church was canonizing a different set of saints. That's a fair point, actually. We don't know who's in heaven, we know that the saints are in heaven, but we don't know who's not in heaven. So many of even the modern Catholic saints, perhaps they're in heaven. Maybe, we don't know. We try not to judge, but I will say it will help it at least helped me to sort of reorient myself to the predominant Orthodox saints, because then I sort of get a better sense of the Orthodox mindset as it is in the world today. So there is some value in switching up which saints you venerate, and obviously you want to keep watch out, because some modern Catholic saints may teach things that are not in line with Orthodoxy. So using discernment and talking to your priest about those sorts of things is really important. Someone said the primary good of fasting comes from obedience more than anything, whether one is keeping the full rule or a modified rule under the direction of the priest. Thank you, Father George. Completely agree. Yeah. Primary good of fasting comes from obedience, right? So I completely agree with that. So yeah. If you are feeling like the spiritual elite, then you are probably not one of their number. Is what I would take from Father George Goodge's comment. Anything else? Well, we're getting pretty close to the 8:30 mark. I was wondering, does anyone have any questions about my two frustrations videos that maybe they want me to sort of talk out? I think we covered a lot of them, or a lot of what we talked about in the videos, but maybe there was something that you wanted me to clarify. We had a lot of that sort of back and forth on Reddit, didn't we? What am I reading? Sort of where people were saying, this summary was all wrong, and I said, well, it's just incomplete. Here's what I meant with the nuance. So we had a little bit of that on those in that Reddit discussion, but certainly don't want to leave anyone in the dark. All right. So, those of you that are joining me for this live stream, you get a little bit of a treat, things that I'm going to be talking about in upcoming videos. My next video is going to be talking about liturgical language, and I'm going to be sort of discussing just from a journalistic point of view, and especially from a classical linguist point of view. I'm going to be talking about how liturgical languages sort of seem to work in Orthodoxy versus traditionalist Catholicism, and so you'll be seeing a video come up on that. Let me see. I have another one in the works that I have forgotten what the topic is. I'll be talking about some of the things that I'm seeing in videos from priests and others who have left the Orthodox Church. So I'll be just looking at some of those patterns that I'm seeing so far. That's a video upcoming. And then at some point, I'll have a special video on the Antiochian Orthodox Archdiocese's new magazine for children. As a former elementary school teacher myself, I was really interested whenever I saw the first issue of that magazine, and I sort of want to go through it on this channel because I think it's a really great resource for families, and I want to talk a little bit about its content and its structure. So I'll be doing a review of that magazine sometime on this channel, sort of as a special. So those are sort of some upcoming topics down the road. But if you think of any others, then let me know in a comment on the community tab. Let me know in the comments for the videos if there are any topics that you want me to discuss. Let's see. Rumpelstiltskin had a comment on Bossiness. I found that my Catholic diocese had become a dictatorship as opposed to monarchy. How are disputes resolved within dioceses in Orthodoxy? I'm going to fully admit that I have no inside information on how disputes are resolved within Orthodox jurisdictions, or even between jurisdictions, because that's something more that like clergy have insight into, or that people who work for the diocese. I do neither, right? I'm neither clergy nor do I work for the diocese, so I wouldn't really have a place in that. All I know is that I've never experienced a dictatorship in Orthodoxy from my bishop or from the metropolitan. So that's just my perspective. And someone else said that coming from evangelical Protestantism, the frustrations were a little different. Of course they were, right? And so would they be if you came from atheism, right? So I can only share my perspective. But yeah, I hope that watching it sort of helped you to see a little bit more about what some of your brother converts and sister converts are going through whenever they convert. So I hope it's still enlightening, even if you're coming from a different background. So great comment. All right. Well, I wish you all a very good night. And as I always say, kalispera, good evening. And we'll do this again. I think this was a lot of fun. We had about 10, somewhere between 10 and 12 people sign on. So maybe we'll do this again. I am a former Latin teacher, so who knows if there is some interest. I might jump on here and talk a little bit about Latin. I could possibly do some Latin lessons on the live stream here. So if anyone's interested in that, let me know in a comment. And hit the like, people. Hit the like buttons. Absolutely. That really helps the algorithm, gets things shared. Hope you all have a good night. Kalispera.